So the first question is, what is actually happening with the council? We've heard for various sources that certain churches have pulled out, others are not going, and is it true, as you alluded to earlier, that, all of the independent or autocephalous churches, agreed to this council, and why are they pulling out at the last minute?
Well, one of the greatest myths that's circulating on the internet and by official voices is that this has been approved by all 14 Autocephalous churches. It's a myth because the council was never approved. It never received Pan-Orthodox approval, which would require synodical decisions on the part of the local churches. In other words, each local church decides on such issues in Synod. All the hierarchy gets together and says, this is what we're going to do. This is a huge issue, very important. The head of the church calls the Synod and they decide on this. This did not happen until before the decision was made in January of this past year. So we hear often people say, we have Pan-Orthodox decision. It's a Pan-Orthodox decision. This is why we're having the council, and people need to honor their decisions. But in fact, the decisions were made by representatives, by the head of the church, and with a few representatives. And that's why after the January decision for the council by the heads of the churches, the decisions came back to the churches, Church of Greece, Church of Romania, all the various churches. And then they had a council. They called the council, most of the churches. I'm not familiar with every single local Orthodox, what they did. Churches then had a local council of bishops to decide what they thought of the text, or what they thought about going. And some said, yeah, we're going to go. Church of Greece had 2 meetings in March and in May. In March, they said, we want to look at these texts and we want to examine them. They had a committee examine them. They came back in May, and they suggested tremendous changes to the text, a whole list of changes they want made to the text. And then they decided, we're going to go to the council and we're going to support these changes. We want to see these changes made. That's the Church of Greece. Church of Bulgaria had several meetings, and they decided they're not going to go to the council. That's not in the best interest of the Church of Bulgaria. In spite of the decision made by the Primate in the meeting in January, he doesn't represent the Church of Bulgaria without synodical backing. This is really important to understand why there are accusations flying against these churches that are not going to the council, and they're really off base, and it's not accurate to say that there was a Pan-Orthodox decision in January. Church of Georgia, the same thing. They had several meetings of the hierarchy to decide their position on this text. Those decisions had not been made. Now we need to go back a little bit. We're going to go back a little bit, and we're going to talk about the prehistory there to understand why those decisions were made. They were not made before January, before the primates went and said, yes, we're going to have a council. The key thing here I want to stress again is that there was a process of synodical, in other words, conciliar, synodical, the bishops together. There was a process of them accepting the decision of the primate and the representatives. And that process in some churches was positive, in other churches it was negative. But the question is not, why was it so late? People are saying, oh, they're so late. We've been planning this conference, this council for decades. And at the last minute, they're pulling out. Well, I'll explain to you why that's the case. But one of the reasons is that there was no synodical examination until March, May, April, and May. So whose fault is it that they did not have the opportunity to decide on the question of the council? Maybe the organizers of this whole Pan-Orthodox Council should have allotted time for the local synods to get together and decide, and not base their decisions simply on the decisions of the representatives. If we're truly interested in conciliarity, synodical decisions, the whole church being a part of the decision, we're going to build into the whole process time for the local churches, the local synods, to meet and discuss the text and discuss the council and approve them. And then we're going to set the date for the council. So the problem is deeper than, well, they bailed out at the last minute. That's not accurate. And it's actually disingenuous on the part of those people who are saying it. Everything in the Orthodox Church happens in council when it's on this level. So that's the answer to the first question, Nico.